Is one shot enough?
Well, no, 2 shots is what you need for both the Pfizer vaccine and the AstraZeneca. But you do get quite good protection even from 1 shot. But 2 shots are what you need. The original studies were done with the AstraZeneca about a month apart. But in England, there seems to be some data that, 12 weeks might actually give you a better response. Now, I think we don't know the answer to that, but there's no doubt you need two doses. But we still need to keep this in perspective for the Australian situation. We do not have community transmission. And when we've had it in the past, over the last 6 months, we've been able to control it. So I do not have an expectation that this is going to go out of control like it has in England, US, and a lot of Europe. I still assume we're going to get small outbreaks, but the more people we get vaccinated, particularly the high-risk group, those over the age of 70, the frontline workers, etc., that will markedly decrease the consequences if we have any spread in the community that we control. Because even after 1 shot, you'll significantly decrease the chance of death and hospitalisation. Now, it's still better that you have the 2. But by the same token, if this doesn't happen till, December or even early next year, providing we don't have spread in Australia and we keep control, I don't think that matters. I mean, we've got the luxury in Australia that we can see what happens to tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people in US and Europe vaccinated. Any rare side effect, we can find out. We know about batches. All of that we can learn from. So we need to roll this out. We need to have many millions of people vaccinated before June, July, before winter starts, because that's our next big danger period, in my view. Yeah. But after that, providing we keep control, the consequences of this getting out are not like we've seen in the US and Europe. Right. And it's never going to be that high anyway.
No, Peter Collignon, you make a very good point. There are 2 aspects to this. One is the health one, but the other is the economic one. And perhaps it's less a health decision than a political one. And one quarantine leak we have seen, Melbourne, for example, locked down, the whole state indeed, locked down for 5 days. So that is the problem. Without a vaccine rollout, we still risk those lockdowns.
Well, the problem is those lockdowns were unreasonable. If you look at Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, the one in Melbourne and the ones in New Zealand, they've made no difference if you've got good contact tracing and good follow-up and the public cooperating. So I'd argue the problem isn't the vaccine, it's the overreaction to lockdown where those restrictions are over the top. Look at New South Wales.
Herein lies the problem, doesn't it? So as you say, it is a political problem. But if we're already in this situation, I mean, Alan Joyce was on this program just yesterday saying that Australia's got to get their heads around that even with the vaccine rollout, we're not going to be donut days forever.
Oh, I think that's exactly true. We're going to have to learn to accept what the risk level we're going to take. This is everywhere around the world. It's not going to go away for years and years. So there is always a danger, even if you're vaccinated, that you will get, you might get an infection, hopefully mild, but that means you can spread it to others. So this expectation that if we get all vaccinated by October, life will go back to normal is unrealistic. We've got this everywhere around the world. Yes, we can do a lot more things in Australia and not have to worry as much because we've significantly 90% or more decreased the risk of death. But we will not be able to go overseas. In fact, there is an argument that I actually think we have to look at is once we vaccinate all the really at-risk people, and do we put all of Australia at the front of the queue? I mean, look at PNG, look at all the areas around the world we want to travel to. Unless and until we control this virus everywhere that we're likely to go to, we are still going to have to live with restrictions, particularly overseas, air travel, etc. So it's in our interest to control this, but it's also in our interest to not be, so selfish about the vaccine that we say everybody else can go jump and, we're not going to share it with any others. We're going to produce 1 million doses a week, supposedly in Melbourne soon in CSL. We need to make sure our most at-risk people are vaccinated. But after that, we ought to look at the region as well and have some ways of making sure that we're looking after others and not just ourselves, particularly if we continue to have minimal transmission of the virus within this country.
Oh, Peter Collignon, I think you just broke thousands of hearts right around the country saying that we're not going to be travelling overseas for years. Do you believe that?
No, well, not for years, but I think, it's realistic that I think particularly after the next winter in the Northern Hemisphere and we see there's not a lot of transmission, that may get it up. And before that, New Zealand, Singapore, potentially Japan and Korea might be on the horizon. But I don't think that's going to be before October, December this year. And in the short term, only people who are vaccinated should travel overseas. but you may well have to home quarantine for a period of time when you get back. We just don't know.
Okay.
So expectations, everything's going to be normal in November, December if we get vaccinated, I think is unrealistic. Children, there is still no vaccine for and won't be till next year. So there's no way the whole population is going to be vaccinated anyway.
Yep, very good point. Quickly about the AstraZeneca jab, what Norway has done because of blood clots, have they overreacted?
Well, I think to some degree you can argue that. It's actually Denmark where death was occurred from what we call a pulmonary embolus, a clot that goes to your lung. And there was one case in Austria about a week or so ago again that was a worry. Now, they need to look at the batches and you need to look at this. But you've got to remember, blood clots occur naturally, or not naturally, but occur in people who aren't vaccinated. So if you vaccinate 1 million people, you are going to see some people within a week, probably a few, who will die of a lung clot that has probably got nothing to do with the vaccine. Now, we need to look into it. But so far, the evidence isn't that, and clots are occurring any more frequently than you'd occur in the population. The studies, the ones that answer that, are where you've got one group given placebo, for instance, and then the vaccine. And in those studies, there is no suggestion of an increase of blood clotting. So, yes, you'll see heart attacks. Yes, you'll see strokes. Yes, you'll see clots going to people's lung after they get this vaccine. But a lot of those is just what happens, if you like, naturally, and not necessarily due to the vaccine. We do need to look into it. And if it increases, yes, do something. But so far, there's not compelling evidence that these vaccines are causing any more side effects or serious side effects than, for instance, the influenza vaccine that we give out every year.